welcome to Memoirs of Successful Women. Today I have Reverend Kate Morgan, who is a social model and entrepreneur whose work has seriously touched people around the world. She is a college professor. She's a 9 times award-winning film producer, 3-time award-winning poet. She's also enrolled in a PhD at the moment on organizational leadership. She has so much happening in her world, and we are going to chat about that today, and a little bit about life in the military. So welcome to the program, Kate.
Hi, it's just such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
You are so welcome. So tell me, I know your backstory is that you're in the military for a very long time, and now you've gone off and done all of this, study and are still studying, and also into poetry and things like that. We're going to be talking diet and lifestyle and exercise and balance, and there's just so much happening in your world. How about we get the listeners sort of just on the journey and tell us what you were doing in the military, or what you might still be doing with them in the future.
So when I was in the military, I joined after I had worked for a hospital group in the US called Kaiser Permanente and Texas Health, and I learned a lot about blue zone and pandemic planning. So I joined the military and I ended up in a chemical unit, which was very interesting because my grandmother married a man who was with the inventors of some very interesting chemical weapons. He actually was part of the invention team that invented Agent Orange. So I, as his step-granddaughter, ended up in the military chemical brigade as a chaplain assistant in a very humanitarian position. And he left Monsanto to become a pastor. So it was almost like all in the family. And I learned a lot about compassion and helping others as a chaplain assistant. And when I left the Army and got a master's degree, I thought I was just going to be teaching English because that's what my degree was in. English rhetoric, it makes sense with poetry and filmmaking and film review, which are things I've done. But during the pandemic, I just got called to all these different groups in Africa, and that's when Reverend Kate really started happening. I mean, a few years prior to the pandemic, I had been working with, and I still work with, Faith Forward Dallas and a bunch of groups here to work on a number of issues like the homeless population and different rights issues to include earlier paroles and more empty prisons. But that's one of the things we really do strive for at Faith Forward Dallas. But I got pulled into this role where I got to help so many different groups in Sierra Leone, Uganda, and Nigeria.
Wow. Deeply ravaged, I'm imagining, by COVID. So that was throughout the time with the pandemic.
Right. Well, when these groups aren't ravaged by COVID, they're generally facing a number of issues related to supply chain, hunger, and a lot of them are doing much better now. There's a building project in VRCE in Uganda, and they've got great leadership under Kizicho Moses and Jamie Fiorucci. That has solidified. I definitely still see a lot of work on the Clubfoot project during COVID's highest points. We were a little less concerned about virus. I mean, we were concerned about it, but we were definitely more concerned about malaria during one of the biggest COVID spikes. We couldn't get the malaria medication that was normally therein. So we worked on that.
Have you always had that social conscience? Is that why you went into the military originally, to be able to help in that chaplaincy type role? Were you always a girl who just wanted to make a difference?
In every way, did it feel like a calling, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my mother was a nurse. My father is a conservatory student who left playing classical guitar and did a lot of different live production roles. And in that, I learned to love art, and I also learned to love serving others. My mother was descended from a famous Civil War surgeon named Simone Baruch, who, built the public bathhouses of New York after the family saw ruin as part of the Confederates. I mean, they're on record as saying the best part of my time in this war has been captured by the Union. We weren't diehards or anything, but because of this, there's always been an attitude of service in my family, and I just felt called very deeply from the time I was a young girl. We were always heavily volunteering, there were numerous ways we volunteered in medicine specifically, and especially in I would say like adult rehab and living. My church was very into that, so we definitely, growing up, I grew up in the Evangelical Covenant, which is the American remnant of the Swedish covenant that, of course, came to be part of the colonizing base. So we really spent a lot of time working with the community for different service projects, and that just stayed with me my whole life.
Incredible background, and it often does feed through multi-generations, doesn't it? That sort of that giving spirit, or the way you've been raised. And I know that you're deeply in tune with cultural heritage, and not only for yourself personally, but in the environments that you've then gone on to work in. Do you see that that's consistent around the world, that everyone actually deep down wants to feel connected to their authentic culture?
Right. And I think for me, my authentic culture is post-Kierkegaardian, and that's definitely Swedish covenant, right? That's Swedish Lutheran sensibility, but it's post-Kierkegaardian in the sense that it's, searching for something deeper and more meaning than, simply just like serving the people I understand around me, right? Like the humans I understand. It's definitely deeper into that fair trade chocolate, and that I've been ignored by society. They call it wild geese. It's this parable of wild geese with Soren Kierkegaard, and that is like, I was that wild goose who could not be like contained, and in every sense, I was like, I couldn't be satisfied with my degree in rhetoric. I couldn't be satisfied with working on 2 gubernatorial campaigns. I had to go deeper into like really strange politics, and like, the strangest politics the US has. And I was, working with Pan-African groups on different ideas of hunger and stuff, with different, like members of different parties who were like cadre members of things trying to wind down the arguments almost from communism and capitalism into a more holistic sensibility of like, how would we really develop this so that we didn't just have, systems of production that benefit the EU and, us nothing. So in every sense, there are a lot of theologians actually that really inspired me on it. One of them was Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a theologian that did as well, and he's a World War II theologian who spent a lot of time in Harlem. And both of those things, like I just kept being pulled further and further, not necessarily into activism, but into things I could actually do. More so than my peers, like in degree programs and in politics even.
Yeah, exactly. You can go a few different ways. That's right. You can go academic. You can definitely go politics. You then really leapt, well, as well as academics, but you've also gone into film, right?
Right.
Is that so you can really just show that story to the world in a palpable way, as opposed to going through the bureaucracy or the theory?
I think that for me, it was very interesting that for me, like I knew that I loved film as a young girl, especially classic film, and especially films that spoke to different social issues, like Metropolis, for example. Like I loved classic film. I would watch it with my grandfather and with my family, and I loved classic film, and I loved the messages therein. And I always wanted to make my own in an auteur sense. I didn't want to make something that was necessarily Hollywood's biggest film, but I wanted to make something that really was meaningful. And my path in early college was broadcast, and I've worked as a journalist in the past. Mm-hmm. And the path from broadcast journalism to film was actually kind of easy for me, because I started reporting on film for a channel called CW33 in the US, which is a major broadcast channel. And then I started reporting. I just was a regular reporter. And then I started mostly reporting on film. And all of a sudden, I just got pulled into making films. It was like, okay, this is something you should do if you're this passionate, because you're not a reporter who's here eating all the pizza. You're asking way too many questions.
Yeah, you're actually really interested. Yeah,
right. You're like deeply interested. You want to know where all the lighting's going. You're interested in the score. I mean, it went from like I'm like making a few packages about film in Dallas to I'm critiquing the Dallas Chamber Symphony on these original Hollywood scores, and now DJ Spooky from Michigan is out, and he's talking about his rework of A Birth of a Nation, which is a classic racist film that a DJ decided he was going to completely reconstruct, and we were all very proud of it in Dallas. We played it at the theater that Lee Harvey Oswald was assassinated Kennedy at. We gave him that theater. And it was like a beautiful moment for Dallas in that it happened about the time that we had a police shooting out here. It was a beautiful moment for like film in Dallas. We were just kind of like, okay, we're really ready to just say we're done with the racism.
And you've ended up though getting 5 award-winning films, right?
Right.
How did you learn all about the film process? So not just being at those sites as a humanitarian, working from that end, but also there's just putting it together that it would be, worthy of, nominations of in award type situations. You've then got to get, producers and teams and other people. What was your learning or experience through that?
Well, what I found was that when I was willing to really let the story shine and work with the best of India, I got one of the best studios in India to make, the film that I have out now, Hearts on Fire. And in every way, did we just like aspire to the absolute best. I did a bunch of reporting on Bollywood and its censorship, and then I made a film Bollywood would easily accept. Surprisingly, America has a much harder time with it. I've had a hard time getting into a few bests here, but in every way did Bollywood love Hearts on Fire. My first award-winning film I made with IFP Chicago, and I provided equipment and I let students from Columbia just shine. I'm like, this is going to be yours, your moment. I know you can do it. And they took home first prize, and they split it all up among themselves. They didn't even want anything out of it. I was just like extra pleased. The second film that won awards that we made, Loyola Chicago decided, gave me one of their students departments and said go for it, and gave me some of their students in the film department, and in every way did that film just become amazing, because I even let them rewrite half of it. I'm like, yeah, here's the script, go ahead. And they rewrote it, and it was beautiful. They cast these amazing web series actors from Chicago in it, who in every way, that one should be revived. I think I should work on that a little more, but in every way did that film come to life. I think the first key in finding that niche where people wanted to award it was that it was humanist. Like every work I've ever made has been absolutely humanist. The second is that when we cast it, we were always very diverse. We went as diversely as possible. Like, okay, we've got a Black Latina, and we've got a mixed Asia, we got a mixed South and North Asian. Okay, and now we've got a member of the Sioux tribe, and now we've got a couple of Celts. All right, and let's throw in, a working class African for good measure. It's always been highly diverse. I wrote roles to be just as far as you could cast the net. So there were large communities interested. The second thing I would say is that we always work to get the best equipment and the best talent, and then the behind the scenes networking to get film fests to really notice you is a process. It's not like a nepotistic process, because you do submit, they watch it, and if the jury or the screening panel likes it, they accept it or not. But to know what those types of people are looking for, you should probably know some before you start, if you catch my drift.
Definitely.
You should know the basic things they're looking for, which I do. Have a jump cut at the beginning, and don't have, unless it's going to be some fantastic visually fascinating sequence, just have a jump cut in, because otherwise, your panel's likely to get bored because they've seen too many films. That's always the first advice. But the second, of course, is, when you write, make sure it's on genre for the fest. When you submit, make sure it's on genre for the fest. A lot of people will do a lot of blanket submitting, but in every way do you want to know that. And then you want the culture of the fest. I've had a lot of success submitting in India, believe it or not. And the reason why I have is because we made sure that every single fest we submitted to understood the experimental feminist nature of Hearts on Fire. In no way did we submit it to a fest that didn't understand at all. the film is an Australian indie. That's the genre that Australia accepted it as. And then in the US, it's hybrid indie and then like jazz to like basically, I would say like multicultural festival.
Did you, obviously I'm feeling that as a college professor, you've actually tapped into, because you've got all these people who are wanting to learn, wanting to be involved, all these students, it actually is a perfect sort of parallel, if you like, that you've got the ideas and the opportunities and they want to be part of this, and you need team, right? So
right.
Actually, I'm thinking this is really clever because you're positioned with people who'd love to be involved in this. Whereas often, I've had another lady recently on my program, and it's kind of like you've got to find people who would be available at that time, to go and film something or be part of it. So putting it all together, I think you've been perfectly positioned in that way.
Well, I think that if Australia is especially interested in anything that I'm connected to, especially here in Dallas, Earth by Festival, it's called Earth X. Has a yearly competition, especially for school-aged children, especially for school-age, like middle school through high school, on environmental issues. That's a favorite. I'm going to be judging for Superstar Art Foundation, which is sort of a beauty pageant art contest and film contest. That's headed by Mei Lu, and she's a fantastic Chinese fashion designer who, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and between here and New York, has some wonderful programs for youth. And then the other thing that's coming up that I'm doing is Lake Travis Film Festival, which is connected to Austin, Texas. It's kind of a little more laid back, a little more Texan-y, but that one definitely has a lot of great opportunities to submit films. I'm judging at LOL Jax, which is a comedy festival in Jacksonville, Florida. So I've had so many opportunities to jump in and help people with film. But when I teach, I usually teach writing at a college level, and I teach linguistics. But when I do teach visuals, both graphic design and film, because I have a background in advertising as well. I've been an advertising editor and conceptual manager for 3 major American firms, and for periods. And in those periods, I really learned to work with teams. But I try to tell my students that you really want to get the thesis of a film just like you want to get the thesis of a paper like established before you write it. We're doing that right now with a team for San Antonio's 48-hour film project, which is fun, a lot of fun. But 48-hour film project is a fantastic way to get a community started in filmmaking. Just teams of anyone, and usually you have professional level filmmakers who want people who maybe have never touched a boom mic or have never touched anything to jump in and try something. That's always a great place.
So just
48-hour film project.
2 days, you just all stacks on, learn it. Do you polish something off? Do you have an end product in 48 hours?
Yes. But usually people who are professional in 48-hour film project are the cameraman, or woman, the camera person. You've got the editors, and then you've got the producer. Everyone else can kind of be, I'm learning it.
Absolutely fantastic. So is this why you left the military? Like, you had an amazing experience and time there, but then it's now freed you to then go and be broader, I suppose, and have your own.
It's actually a deep story. I left the military because I was married to a wounded soldier, and my unit was very upset I left the military. And the wounded soldier, bless his heart, was not very good at being a husband. He's a very good chess player. He's a very good Olympic gymnast. He still trains people. He just, didn't have the skills to be a very good husband. And I know I had to work on mine as a partner at all. So our marriage dissolved, but I had already left the military at that point because he was upset. He had a wife in the military, even though he met her there, if that made any sense. Like, the therapist tried to explain it to him. It's like, she was in the military when you met her. So it shouldn't surprise you that she's not behaving like a docile housewife.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Like, she's a little too much of a go-getter. So in every way, we endeavored for 4 years to make that marriage work. And by marriage therapist 6, it had just gotten so ugly that, the bruises on the outside were why the therapist advised me to leave, even though it was against Louisiana state law. And surprisingly, that my former partner, had studied at seminary to be a pastor. So I'd already gone through all his books. We had literally worked to set up a Bible language institute. I know a lot of things about a lot of obscure languages related to Bible, to Bible translation and study. And, I survived sexual assault in that union, and it was just advisable to end it. And I really haven't had a serious partner in 10 years, even though the marriage only lasted 4. But what I found was taking that pain and becoming Reverend Kate with it was so much more important than getting hung up on not having a partner.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Very good. That's a gold nugget for those listening in. It's about being comfortable in your own self. There's a time, and who knows how long that time is, and there's no rush on that. You're not better by suddenly, yeah, that's right, finding another partner, moving on. I think there's a lot of time of becoming Reverend Kate and who you are.
I know how to flirt with one of Dallas's best conductors, and I know how to flirt with one of Houston's best parole, like parole to sentencing lawyers. Like we're because of politics and art, right? We're friends. I know how to be friends with really cool people who have been interested. I think the step I need to take is like really getting intentional about what I want for a long period of time, and I'm sure I can do that.
Yeah, I'm very sure you can do that. So you're also into poetry. So you're in this sort of, you feel like film creation is, it's obviously artistic, it's deep, it's complex, getting story narratives, and then also poetry. Have you always loved poetry, or do you feel like the poetry, does it allow you just to have a different way of sharing a narrative? Does it touch different people? Why poetry?
Well, I made my first award-winning poem at age 5, and I made my first award-winning film type project. It was still broadcast. It was my first award-winning broadcast project at age 17, right? Mm-hmm. So with poesis, I had gotten into the habit of working with imagery and narrative, and doing it in a way where it really touched large groups of people, and it just kept compounding in my writing. And I won many writing awards all throughout my teenage years. And then as I transitioned to my first attempt at college, in high school is when I started winning awards that, a lot of college people were up for, actually. But my first attempt at college, when I started transitioning all that to my first attempt at college, I found that I was just struggling through all of these issues with feminine image, with sexuality, with coming from a religious family, but not necessarily feeling it. and all of these things that a lot of people who are 19 years old do. And I made some very interesting work that ended up on cable broadcast and ended up, in the local community, not much more than that. And it was very artistic. We even called it visual poem at the time. And it was intense because I was working through a whole bunch of Annie Nin and Sigmund Freud and like psychoanalysis, Lacan, and things leading up to World War II, Henry Gibson, the Doll's House. I was working through all that, feeling just sort of jumbled up about the idea of a relationship at all at the time. And I was dating an opera producer named Salvatore Vito. So I was singing in jazz clubs, kind of like working up to it on the way. But I decided instead to take a more normal approach to work, and decided to work for some hospital systems, and learned a lot about pandemic planning, like more than the average person. So that was cool. But in every sense with poesis, it just comes from a more root part of myself. And winning awards it's interesting because you write work, you expect you hope people like it, and then when somebody comes back and says, yes, that was worthy of merit.
Yes.
Like, oh, that's even better. Like that, like a jury found this worthy of merit. And in every way, as a child, every 3 years, like clockwork, would it happen? From the time I was 5 to the time I was to the time I was graduated from high school, poetry awards were very easy. Just working with, I don't know how to explain it, because it's almost the same as film. I'm not really working with words. I like start with a root image, right? And I see the action and I see how it transpires. But recently in poetry, my book, Slowly Marking Time, is currently under consideration of a favorite press. I don't know whether or not, I don't know where it's at on it or not, but it is under consideration. And I've got another set of poetry I worked on at a writing residency called Sundress Academy for the Arts, and I've got some left from Tupelo Press's 3030. So I've been working with a lot of very well-known American small presses in the American South on, I would say, issues that like the people who set up those presses, like, anywhere from 30 to 50 years ago, on like we're still working on mental health concerns. Like breaking down that oil-based society, that oil-based patriarchal society that made you feel like you were less.
Yes.
And turning that T.S. Eliot's broken heap of images into something a little more realistic, and then something more self-actualized, something more majestic. I tend to manifest creatively all over the place. I actually got called into a local production of Leslie Gore's music as musical this weekend. They're just like, can you please come do this? Like, okay, I will. I mean, obviously you need me on this cast, but it's amusing. Like, nobody really thinks of Dallas as a city as full of art or as robust with art as New York or LA, but in every way is it. I mean, Chicago is that way too. Chicago has a lot of art, but the art in Chicago is often highly political, and it's often highly charged in a certain direction, and you have a clique and you can't work with another clique. Dallas is almost the opposite of that. A lot of the art is subsidized socially. A lot of the art is labors of love of different places that got the right charity contribution at the right time. But Dallas really does have a scene with art that is just, it's very public. A lot of it's very public because building it off of the old public broadcast or off of the old oil philanthropy is just how it tended to go. It's usually very public and it's usually very passionate. And Dallas is where I learned critical rhetoric, and I learned a lot of different disciplines that were very well known in the 1960s that have sort of disappeared in the rest of the US. Like, we're teaching something else now. And Dallas has like upheld them, as Dallas-Fort Worth has just upheld them as like, this is a bastion and we're keeping it for another 20 years at least to see how the rest of this goes. And in every way is it a highly educated city, and in every way is it a city that just, once you're in the scene, it's like you're never out. So being appreciative, like I'm just very appreciative of that. I've made films in St. Louis. I've done journalism in Louisiana. I've done the kind of the challenging journalism in Louisiana where when different people of different ethnicities and different religions are challenged, we've had to call in the ACLU. I've been part of like that sort of like group of people who like, we're here because this Buddhist student is literally never going to be treated correctly by the Sabine Parish School District unless we really push. And in every way is Dallas just this beautiful multicultural like place of expression that nobody imagined it would be after the Kennedy assassination.
It's reinvented itself in a way least expected. Oh my goodness. I feel like you've had so many lives already. And now you're enrolled in a PhD on organizational leadership. Why did you choose organizational leadership as opposed to film or art or something else?
It chose me in every way during the pandemic. As I was helping different groups organize in Africa, it chose me. You are organizing, you are leadership. For a while, like, my life seemed kind of confusing because I kept having all of these, different art related things shut down because of the pandemic. And in every way did like these humanitarian efforts just show up. I'm like, okay, I'm leading. I guess I'm leading here. And of course other people are leading, and that's beautiful. And in every way, have I been blessed for choosing that? Because I would, if the story sounds ridiculous, a descendant of Confederates who understood, humanism in New York and then working class status in Chicago, like went Swedish, Lutheran, and Buddhist, and then suddenly in the right time they understood their connection to different African tribes. I mean, that story is, I mean, of course I would want, if there were anything I'd want to say about that story, is that anyone can do it. Like anyone, like if we could turn from slavery, our love of slavery and and any idea that gave us racism in that way, could anyone on earth? Because the poorest person eating the cheapest chocolate bar, like reifying, cacao slavery, could turn from it the next day. I mean, in every way, is that the kind of grace, and is that the kind of enlightenment and understanding that could raise the whole world to consciousness?
Yeah, exactly. So once you've come out with a PhD, you will then be able to be, I suppose, accredited, revered. It gives you that.
I already publish, right? I already publish academically, so that's not what I'm reaching for. That's what I was reaching for with my master's, and I didn't realize it. I'm like, I'm reaching for this goal, and I didn't understand what it was, and that was being as good as a PhD while academically publishing, because that's what they were trying to raise me to do. Because the work I would turn in was just so challenging for most of them. They're like, okay, we're just gonna have to make you that good. But in every way, am I now working on being able to hold those positions within institution with the Rev accreditation? Yes.
So it's actually done that full curve. I suppose we were originally talking about, the humanitarian, the political, that organizational, whereas now you've had the experience, got the following, you've got so many things under your belt. It's now by being able to do this PhD, it'll give you that sort of presence in that's right.
When you want to teach academically, you can hold the masters and do some teaching, but if you want to teach in the department and hold the departmental position, in every way do you want that PhD. And in no way is anybody telling Kate Morgan there's not enough seats, please could you go find something else to do. They did tell me that on my English masters. They're like, we've got enough people who can teach English, we're going to need you to go find something else to do. In every way was that told to me. We really have enough English teachers. Go ahead and adjunct, but we don't encourage you to try and become. Yeah. We don't encourage you to try and become a departmental tenure track English teacher. In these other fields, in every way, has Kate been told, please. Linguistics and organizational leadership has everyone said, please, Kate, can you we really want to give you that teaching fellowship, can you?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there's other reasons, Richard, and that's what we do. We have to one, follow our heart, be passionate about it, but also work the system, find out how we can be best appreciated, valued, be given the opportunities to then be able to continue doing what you're doing. You're doing so many things. Now, this is going to surprise the listeners as well, that you're also super into your health. I know you said when we first tapped in today, you've been running. What have you learned? And I know in your backstory, it even says that you're a bit of an overweight. You were an overweight
journalist,
journalist. And kind of like
journalist and field organizer. Yes. In every way, I worked on 2 gubernatorial campaigns, and I was a journalist after I had a laparoscopic cholecystectomy related to just overweight that happened after the military during my master's degree. Because in every way, having the stack of books and just being sedentary, I gained way too much. So in every way, learning to love myself while being very serious about my consumption habits and my movement habits, really, really drive, my fitness. And it was really a beautiful experience, more than it was some sort of harrowing one, right? And I mean, sometimes I was tough on myself. Sometimes I would be mean to myself, but in no way was it some sort of thing where I felt horrible, ugly, or fat or anything. It was just more along the lines of, if you know that you can't live this way, you know that you need to move, you know that you need to eat less. And as I used regular transportation less and used public transportation more, that helped, because I would walk more. I got outside more. Every weekend I would spend hours outside really enjoying it. That helped. And then yoga, of course. I've actually got a retreat that I'm working on with a very famous yogi out of India. It was actually really funny because a retreat system in Costa Rica contacted me, and I'm working on what we're going to have there. And a yogi contacted me afterward, going, "Are you sure? Like, why don't we do this together?" And I'm like, "Yes, we should. That would be fantastic." Yoga, definitely, especially the Surya Namaskars, and really getting into the practice of like 108 a day, and focusing on enlightenment over, let's say, a pint of ice cream or beer. Not that you can't have a glass of beer or a bowl of ice cream from time to time, but the scoop of ice cream once in a while, as opposed to like the bowl I grew up with.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Portions
Right.
and timing. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
so like controlling your emotions and mindfulness is everything for me on that. And every way did I learn to control my sense of emotion with like Buddhist to Hindi mindfulness practices.
Yeah. And has that been a revelation post, your relationship breakdown and all the works that you've done? Thought, I need to actually just get myself grounded. I need to learn about my own, mindset and self-discipline in a way different to when you were working in the military, and you were probably, I'm assuming, very process driven, very, this is
Right.
what we do, to suddenly, this is who I am.
Yes, working in the military in every way is expressed goals with expressed plans, and sometimes like highly specified steps. Sometimes not. Sometimes the goals, sometimes the goals were just given to you, and you had a deadline and you could do it. But for the most part, a lot of tasks were broken down, and in every way did that highly regimented lifestyle not even produce the same results I have right now. I was fit in the military. I was in every way fit. I was in every way muscular, and I was in no way unattractive. But it wasn't the same kind of fit I am now, because the things you could still consume in the military, the emotions you could still have. The military probably taught me more to suppress emotion and achieve a goal. With mindfulness, I have to actually work on the emotion and create a state of mind that will create something else for me. It will create a new sense of understanding and enlightenment and joy. I mean, I can go through some of the world's worst things. When I lost my mother passed on in 2017. And I ended up in her old neighborhood, not even thinking about it, not even really knowing it was until I looked at the streets. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I was living in her old neighborhood in an apartment near there, and I ended up taking on one of Jesse Jackson's interns who walked away from Bush, and like having her do media reporting for IFP Chicago. And it was a really unique experience, because in no way did I plan it, in no way would I have connived it. In no way would I even have dreamt it up, but in every way was I making change in a neighborhood my mother felt like what change was impossible in. It was the kind of place that used to have a steel mill and you could only eat potatoes and onions, and in every way was I making radical change there while eating black rice and like leaf vegetables. Just like to dream the impossible dream. I did it. Like we did it intergenerationally. We did it.
So what does future success look like for you, Kate?
I think future success is going to be getting more coalitions together in Africa and in Dallas to Africa to drive real change. We've been having talks with different sexual health providers and licensed social workers this week that I think are going to drive some really important change. Mental health in Africa in every way is sort of like a classed thing where we're really only treating those who have. And in every way do those who have nothing need more treatment and need more need maybe not necessarily medical, not like medical and it's like I've got to give you a pill, but like I need treatment for my trauma and abandonment, some sort of counseling, some sort of guidance. That would definitely be a great thing to get to common or destituted Africans, I think.
Yeah.
I think that would be ideal. I think that getting, you know, programs together that could do simple art therapy even would be useful. I mean, even if we can't like outpour all we should, simple art to craft therapy and simple life skills therapy that will, like, I built the house, I got it together, I got all these orphans in it. Like, I still feel like completely, that's what I'm seeing in a lot of my groups. I'm still feeling completely overwhelmed, and like, you know, my society's still falling apart. So getting very simple therapies in along with the education, when there's a lot of good drive for education right now among different masses. So getting therapy in as well will be a big step.
Yeah, fantastic. And there'll be so many people to collaborate to make these things bigger and better than you can ever imagine. And that's what I love about the power of the collective, right? That there are people, you know, on the field over there, you know, and you with your networks and your qualifications and your positioning with your organizational leadership, you can actually go, yeah, I can help, I can facilitate, but also you can take, you get the value of the synergy, right? Of the collective of people who are passionate because it's their area and it's their people, and it's you know, it's multi-generational impact on doing. Sometimes you think it's not as much, you've always want to do more, but it's still absolutely massive, the impact you can have when you get people aligned for the same purpose, right?
I already know we can. I mean, we're having conversations between a very excellent doctor of social work and some of the strongest women I've worked with in Africa. I know we can do it.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being on my show today. It's been just the most interesting, enlightening conversation. I think you're absolutely amazing. What you've achieved in your life thus far is incredible. I know you're still evolving. You're just so passionate and so capable in so many diverse areas. And I really praise you for just following your authentic self, right? And just seeing where that leads you.
Thank you so much for having me on today, and thank you for the wonderful profiles you've been doing of so many amazing people and women. It has just been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.